Hey there, Navandis here. So let's talk about league starters for 3.18 Sentinel League. Now, before going over my actual suggestions, I want to provide some context on why these choices and why I feel there's a worrying trend which can lead a lot of players into a trap. At this point in time, I assume everyone knows that there will be no changes to skills, gems, passives, ascendancies or items in the upcoming league, so in theory, every single build that worked fine in 3.17 will continue to do so. However, that doesn't mean things will be identical. The meta will not necessarily shift, but more likely reinforce, basically, the player base doubling down on builds that prove to work well in Arch Nemesis. But that will have a strong impact on the economy, with demand substantially increasing for popular build-enabling items like Omniscience, Ashes, Dead Reckoning, Aegis Aurora, Cold Iron Point, etc. Assuming supply will stay the same, prices will then invariably increase. The other meta trend that is quickly picking up momentum is that 3.18 will be a bossing league due to the introduction of uber pinnacle bosses. While that might be true, in my opinion it's also completely irrelevant for choosing a league starter build. Now, why do I think a league starter build has nothing to do with uber pinnacle bosses? Well, to put it bluntly, unless you're a super experienced racer, you won't kill those bosses in the first 2 or 3 weeks of a new league. And by the time you will, it literally won't matter what your starting build was a few weeks before. The economy will have settled, most items will be available, crafting will be affordable, even leveling up an alt will be super fast. The only scenario in which starting with a great bossing build would matter is when you plan on and you're able to kill those bosses in the first few days, ahead of almost everyone else, being able to sell whatever they drop for a metric ton of currency. Then use that currency to buy the entry ticket for the boss fight, like fragments or invitations, reliably kill the boss again, sell the loot, rinse and repeat. So you need to be realistic with the odds of pulling that off. Are you currently able to league start with a bossing build, gear up with whatever scuffed items you can get in 3-4 days and start farming the hidden, the feared Uber Elder and stuff like that deathless? Because those uber pinnacle bosses will be much harder than these fights. Finally, take a few moments and think about exactly what you personally plan on doing in the first 2-3 weeks of the league. Just because a few new bosses were added to the game, it doesn't mean that's what you'll be forced to deal with at league start. Those can be great mid or long term goals for 3.18, but that has nothing to do with your starter build. Okay, got that out of the way, so let's go over my recommendations. First up, the freshly remade Soulwrest Necromancer. This is hands down the most well-rounded build I've played in probably more than a year. Huge DPS, amazing map clearing, strong defenses, cheap, hey, it's even a good boss killer. Now, I know what you might think, this cannot be a good league starter, it needs the Soulwrest stuff. Well, here's the Soulwrest price graph from 3.17. Even in the first 24 hours of the league, it didn't go for more than 20 Chaos Orbs, dropping to 5C in 2 days. And everyone and their dog will probably play Skelly Mages or detonate Dead Necros, not Soulwrest, so demand and prices shouldn't really increase in 3.18. On the flip side, once you get the stuff, you'll have the equivalent of a 7 link weapon that you don't actually need to link. On top of that, the build only uses a 5 link body armor, not a 6 link, and that will save you a ton of currency. Leveling this build before getting the stuff is really easy as well, with Absolution completely trivializing the campaign and even early maps, so you can quickly get the few Chaos Orbs you'll need to pop off. It can also run any map modes including Reflect, no regen, no leech, and it works very well for any type of content beyond just maps, like Blight, Expedition, Heist, Delve, Delirium. Whatever your Atlas strategy will be in 3.18, you can rely on this build to farm it. Check the video description or pin comment for the full Soulwrest Necromancer guide. My second recommendation is yet another absolute classic that I decided to revisit and give a well-deserved remake, the Ark, which, only this time, I went with an Occultist rather than the usual Elementalist. And the result actually blew me away with just how balanced the build ended up being, without relying on any broken mechanics or item. Great defenses, amazing clearing speed, and a super simple playstyle make it the perfect starter build for both new players and veterans. In fact, Ark builds have been pretty much synonym with the concept of a league starter, and this one is definitely not an exception. It's also well established that Ark is one of the best mapping abilities in the game, depending very little on gear or even the player's own skill, and that is doubly true when combined with the explosions provided by the Occultist ascendancy. You get Arc as early as level 12, and while going through a campaign you can use any staff, scepter, wand or dagger that has some spell damage and cast speed on it, and it will work great. The build starts off as a balanced life plus energy shield hybrid, and at around level 80 it transitions to a pure energy shield variant. In the full guide I walk you through how to do that and what are the bits and pieces you'll need. The passive tree was also designed with this in mind, and I made sure it has enough defense and DPS even before switching. You can find the link to that guide in the video description and pinned comment. Up next is the Giga Chad Cyclone Slayer. Now this build really checks all the boxes for a great league starter. It doesn't require any mandatory uniques, and the few best in slot ones are common or easy to target farm, so this should work totally fine in SSF as well. It doesn't rely on mechanics that only come online once you reach endgame or buy certain items. It's really beginner friendly as it doesn't use any unintuitive combos or interactions, just plain old spin to win, and it has a smooth and constant gear progression curve. Basically, if you follow the gearing advice from the full guide, then no matter what your budget is, the build will perform proportionally with the investment. There's no "you must be this rich to play this build" entry barrier. However, keep in mind that this goes both ways. You can't drop just 50 chaos on this and expect to wipe the floor with the new bosses. Be realistic and you won't be disappointed. The Slayer Ascendancy is also very well balanced with a great mix of bonuses for map clearing and bossing and decent defensive layers, so you won't need to roll a second character to farm a certain type of content. The build makes for an extremely good long-term project as well, a character you can play for the entire league and keep upgrading. Leveling up the Cyclone Slayer is a very smooth process. Just use the skill setups I've listed in POB, grab a few early auras like Precision and War Banner, a low level Clarity to help out with mana sustain, and do your best to upgrade your weapon every 5 or 10 levels. The weapon will always remain your top priority even when you're deep into the Atlas. The difference between, let's say, a 400 physical DPS stuff and a 500 DPS one with some crit is actually huge. Moving on, fourth of the list, Viper Strike Pathfinder. So Viper Strike is one of those old school skills that was made for single target, but when using it with melee splash and ancestral call support, it turns into a very respectable area of effect ability. You get Viper Strike at level 1, and just like most other chaos damage skills in the game, it gets the bulk of its damage from gem levels and passives rather than gear. And this makes it ideal in a new league scenario as you can save up your currency for upgrades once you get to the Atlas. Even then, there is very little competition for the items you'll need in this build. Almost nobody uses non-elemental claws, and most of the best in slot items are fairly common ones. You can easily kill stuff like Shaper, Elder, Conquerors, even good old Cirrus with 2 Wasp Nest claws as your weapons, and usually those only cost a few Chaos Orbs. The playstyle is also very simple without complicated combos or gimmicks. You hit stuff and watch it melt in a glorious green cloud. Anything that survives your initial hits will receive additional poison stacks from each nearby enemy that died. The Pathfinder is also very versatile and popular ascendancy, so you can even pivot to another build later in the league if you feel like switching gears. To summarize, very cheap and easy to play, not really gear dependent and without mandatory uniques. The main skill is usable from level 1 and is well balanced for both map clearing and bossing. If this sounds like what you're looking for, then check out the full guide by following the link in the pinned comment and video description. And the final recommendation is a tanking beast, the Poisonous Concoction Champion. Similar to Viper Strike, this is a build I can wholeheartedly recommend for brand new players due to its amazing defenses and simple playstyle while being really budget friendly. All the extra tankiness will act as sort of training wheels, allowing you to make additional mistakes without being immediately punished, which is especially valuable if you're a beginner. Now, leveling up with this build will also feel like cheating, as the vast majority of your damage comes from gem levels and passives rather than items. In fact, you can have literally 0 damage modes on your gear from level 1 until you reach the Atlas, and you'll still have no issues whatsoever. And since the build doesn't even use a weapon, as Poisonous Concoction is an unarmed skill, you can save quite a bit of currency and use it for other items. To be fair, even the top tier best in slots recommended gear is quite cheap, as the build was intentionally designed to be a budget option for more casual players. For the same reason, however, you shouldn't expect it to be an amazing boss killer. The skill itself doesn't lend itself well to that, and damage scaling beyond a certain point becomes too expensive to be worth the investment. On the other hand, I'm fairly certain that with a few adjustments, you could actually play this build in hardcore quite comfortably, so if you've always wanted to give that a try, this could be a pretty good option.
Learn anything new, Exile?